You love the HD600 series, and now you're wondering what a good dynamic driver upgrade over those would be. Could it be Meze's latest headphone? Let's find out if it is. This is the new 109 Pro from Meze Audio, and it's a dynamic driver open back headphone that retails at $799. As we've come to expect from Meze's headphones, the 109 Pro is a beautifully designed and exceptionally well-built headphone that blends elements like walnut wood, zinc, and manganese steel into what I think is a rather elegant looking device. I'm certain that I've said this for other of Meze's headphones, but I feel as though I must also point out that the 109 Pro offers a superb level of comfort. It's one of those headphones that I can truly wear all day without any fatigue. The velour ear pads are very soft on the skin and they're very spacious, and combined with a self-adjusting headband, they do an excellent job at easily distributing the headphone's clamp force, making for a very comfortable fit all around. One more thing to note here is that despite using premium materials, the headphone remains fairly light at 379 grams, so most users should not have problems with the headphone's weight. But now that we talked about the design and the comfort, let's now talk about sound, because I feel as though that's actually what's most interesting about this headphone. If I'm being completely honest, I strongly believe that this is Meze's best tuned headphone out of the box. I find its tonality to be easily way more enjoyable than that of either of the Empyreans or even of the Lyric, which was a headphone that I enjoyed and reviewed late last year. And you know, the tonality here on the 109 Pro is not exactly one I'd say that is completely neutral sounding for my tastes and preferences, but it is, in my opinion, well balanced with an airy sound signature, and it's just very easy to listen to despite having some slight deviations or colorations in its sound, which we'll now talk about. The bass on the 109 Pro has a thick sound to it, and it's likely why this headphone manages to feel fairly warm sounding despite having present upper mid-range and treble regions. Now, for bass extension, the 109 Pro performs very well actually, with only a tiny bit of roll-off that I could hear under 30 Hz. So you're really getting a defined sub-bass region with a good bit of depth and rumble. It's also got a fairly generous bass shelf under 100 Hz. That's set maybe a few dB under what's suggested by Harman's 2018 preference target curve, which is actually more to my liking, and I find that it keeps the sub bass feeling energetic without becoming, you know, too boomy or overbearing. As we move to the mid bass, this is where one of the two prominent colorations are on the 109 Pro, and that is that to me it sounds as though there is like a bump at around 200 Hz, and this made the bass sound, yes, quite a bit warmer, but it made it sound a little bit more swollen, so it took away some of the bass's sense of definition. Now, overall, I don't think it sounds as snappy or as precise as the bass response you get on something like the Focal Clear or Hi-Fi Ananda, but it's still a clean and enjoyable bass response that I think is very much suitable for those who prefer a slightly more velvety or thicker or darker bass tuning. Moving along then to the mid-range, I think that this is actually a very solid tuning here that adequately reproduces midtones. For the most part, the mids have an organic and natural voicing with good upper mid-range presence. There's only one thing I'd like to point out though, and that is that there's a bit of a dip around 2K. It's sort of similar to what you get on like Hi-Fi Man headphones if you experience something like that on the Sundara or even on the Ananda and Aria. And I didn't find it to affect the 109 Pro's timbre all that much, but it did thin out the mids a tiny bit. And things like brass instruments or electric guitars, they sounded particularly softer. You know, they didn't have as much of their bite as I would have expected. Other than that though, I find the mids to be well presented on this headphone, and they definitely have the most natural timbre I've heard in a Meze headphone. Lastly, for frequency response though, we have the highs, and I find that the 109 Pro has a slightly bright tilt to it in this region, particularly towards the upper treble, which is the other noticeable coloration that I had mentioned earlier. It's particularly towards the air region above 10K where I find that the 109 Pro sounds just a tiny bit boosted. It's not offensive or harsh to listen to, but it does make for a slight timbral change in the highs, something that may or may not bother you based on your listening preferences. There's also a tiny peak at around 6K that introduces a bit of low treble sibilance, but that's actually way more subtle, and it's not something that I really found to be bothersome or a cause for concern, despite considering myself to be fairly treble sensitive. So as a whole, I actually quite like the treble tuning here on the 109 Pro and how it's balanced us to the rest of the frequency response. I think has a nice sparkle to it that does highlight all the nuances and tones in this region of the frequency response without actually sounding strident. Moving on to technical performance, we'll start off with resolution. And in this regard, I feel like the 109 Pro is pretty much in line with the other headphones in this price bracket, like, you know, the Dan Clark Audio Noir, the Hi-Fi-Man Ananda, the LCD2 Classic. The only headphone that I really think is more resolving in this price range is the OG Focal Clear. Either way, I find this to be a very resolving headphone that creates a very clean and pristine image of the music. And I do think that for this category, it offers a tangible upgrade over something like the HD6XX series headphones or the Hi-Fi-Man Sundara. Then as for its spatial presentation, I think that the 109 Pro has a great soundstage. It's actually a very open sounding headphone, and it's also very capable when it comes to creating a sense of distance. In this regard, I find that it performs significantly better than something like the Clear and the LCD2, and it also has very precise imaging that perfectly delineates the positioning of sound, something that it does a lot better than the other headphones I've mentioned so far. Not that many people, I think, watching this video buy their high-end headphones for gaming, but for me, I love playing video games. I think you can see my Valorant collections on the background. So for me, having good imaging is very important, and I feel like that's something that the Clear and LCD2 don't do. But there is one thing that I do think the 109 Pro doesn't do as well as those other headphones that I mentioned though, and that is instrument separation. It's got a great soundstage, but I just feel like compared to the Ananda, the LC2, and the Clear, those are just better at like highlighting individual lines that make up a track, which, you know, I feel like that also enhances their sense of clarity over that of the 109 Pros. Okay, so now to wrap up this review on the 109 Pro, I'll of course share my final thoughts on the headphone, but also wanted to draw some comparisons to the Focal Clear. So of course the Clear is about $100 more expensive than the 109 Pro, but the first thing I'll say is that the availability of these two headphones in this price range is something that makes me quite happy, because like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, when it comes to upgrading from the HD600 series stuff, there really isn't, you know, much that I was a fan of. At least like there weren't many like solid options under $1,000 that I was like, I would really reliably recommend if what you were looking for, you know, was an open back headphone with that dynamic driver sound. But with these two headphones, I feel like we now have two very solid dynamic driver options to choose from that do provide a worthwhile upgrade in sound quality without pushing you into spending, you know, in the over $1,000 bracket. And as for choosing between these two headphones, for me, it breaks down like this. If you prefer a warmer sound signature, you want a strong sense of punch and slam, and the headphones' detail retrieval capabilities are a priority, then I think you should go with the Clear. And if day-long listening comfort, a more natural timbre, or a more spacious soundstage is what you're looking for, then I think that the 109 Pro is the one for you. So yeah, I think that Meze did really well with the 109 Pro, and to be completely honest, it's now become one of my favorite headphones under $1,000. Its sound signature does have some coloration, but they're very tasteful in the way that, you know, they're implemented into its frequency response, and it makes for a truly enjoyable listen. I also have to say that I love the level of comfort these things provide. I think that I could sleep with these things on, so could it be the best headphone for ASMR? Well, I think that's a topic for a different video. So that is all for me today. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful, do hit this video with a like. If you want to learn more about the 109 Pro or many other headphones, I highly encourage you to check out the guides and reviews section of headphones.com. Engage with the audio community by joining the headphones.com forums or our official Discord, which are both linked below. And until next time, this is Chrono signing off.